Answer that. There is no one smarter than me in the room, I'm sorry, Angela.
Well, given I asked the question and you don't know the answer, does that make me smarter than you?
We're elected by the public. It's not my fault.
We'll find out for you, Angela, and get back to you.
He's the one guy smarter than me in the room.
So you'll
okay, so we'll find that out. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you.
David?
To us by email. It's a very good point that Councillor O'Leary raised. It's probably not to do with this committee in some ways, it just happens to have ended up here, but I myself have been waiting for that for a while. I wasn't aware it was supposed to come here, so thanks, Angela.
Sure, I can't see that being a problem. Do you see that being a problem at all, Becca? No? Okay. Will it actually formally, is it due to come formally back to Council, is it?
Go to Council, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll find out and I'll send an email out to all of you.
Great, thank you.
So you'll do two things, send an email out just to answer those questions, and then also we'll, somewhere along the line, we'll get their report, will we? Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other questions on the confirming the agenda? Okay, those in favour, we got a mover and a seconder for that, don't we? Okay, those in favour, those against, carried, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Thank you. No declarations of interest. Do we have? We had no scheduled public speakers. Is there anyone there from the public? No one from the public. You're all vested interests, so okay. Thank you. Okay, the Finance Committee meeting minutes, item 6, page 6 of your bound agendas. There are a couple of little typos which we have will get sorted. Other than that, I'm happy to move those as a true and fair record. Mallet, Casson, any discussion or queries? Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Item 7, which is one of the late items, which is the Chair's report. I'll take it as read and happy to hear any discussion or questions or congratulations or things like that. So it's came out under a separate.
No, or we did. Yes.
But there might
the Facebook machine.
What if you can't get onto OneDrive?
Maybe Amy, have we got any copies over there?
No, we're cool. Thank you.
The Chair's report should probably be framed, I think. Oh. Framed and posted around the wall. So I'm just trying to make sure everyone's got a copy of it, Dave, then we'll get to that.
It left me none.
So Mark's just getting a copy. Has everyone else got a copy?
Thank you.
Angela just sneezed all over it. The disrespect is appalling.
Making smart-ass comments about my Chair's report.
Okay, so everyone's got a copy of the Chair's report and the item on development contributions because they were in the same, they came stapled together. Okay, Dave, you've got a question.
I've got a question.
Or a point.
Is maybe not to you, but it relates to your Chair's report, and thank you for those figures. It was a scintillating read. I did just before I fell asleep last night, but seriously, I would be interested in knowing what the overheads components.
What are you talking? Are you talking about item 2, the Claudlands?
Yes, sorry,
yep, sorry.
I'm talking about the Claudlands bit. I'd be interested in knowing what the overheads component of the loss is. In other words, if Claudlands was a standalone unit and didn't have to pay a share of management overheads, accounting sections overheads, etc., like that, what that would be. Very broadly, and this isn't quite accurate, but if you took the overall result, so for example, the bottom year, 16-17, the overall result is $7.6 million deficit. The gross margin is the operating deficit. So, and I hope I'm right on this. So the overheads would be $6 million.
would be the 7.6
Yeah,
minus
that's
the
what I
1.6.
wasn't quite sure what the gross...
Is that close, Sean?
Yeah, look, if I could just run through some numbers for you. For the 2016-17 financial year, the operating deficit for Claudelands was $750,000. But then if you add back in the cost of depreciation at $3 million, an Hamilton City Council overhead allocation of $800,000, a support unit allocation of $875,000 and notional finance costs of $2.6 million, it comes up to that figure, that deficit of 6.889.
Thanks, that's helpful. I'm just wondering if we could have that in a little table for those years that since we started there. Is that possible, Sean?
Yes, I could send that out through the chair.
Thank you. And Sean, could you also update it with the budget for the current year?
Which would be a projected sort of...
projected.
Yeah, look, certainly for the 2017-18 financial year, we're budgeting for a operating deficit of $440,000, but a net or total deficit of $7.7 million.
Including depreciation, etc.
Depreciation, interest charge, council recharge, and so on.
Yeah. So my follow-up question is, there was consideration of H3 becoming a CCO at one stage. Where's that gone to? What stage is considerations in that area at the moment, Sean?
That question mark still remains open. You'll recall earlier this year we put a paper forward which did recommend looking into developing H3 into a CCO entity, and it was agreed to defer that until further consideration later this year. So that's still on the table for consideration to put it into a CCO. With
the Claudelands being one component of H3, albeit a fairly bit large part of it, what is there going to be figures that would say with and without Claudelands being, what it would look like, or is it all being lumped together and that's the only way it's being looked at?
Well, it has all been lumped together, but we could quite easily separate the two. The only thing I would say is that we have consolidated our operation in H3 so that the people who work at H3 span all venues, so that we can get greater degree of efficiency, and that's in sales and marketing and core operating staff and so forth. So we've been able to get efficiency through that. So the question is, if you separated the two out and say, for example, made Claudelands a CCO in its own right, then you'd have to question whether or not those operating efficiencies that we've found could be sustained as a separate unit. I would also remind you that the paper that did suggest that H3 could become a CCO did not necessarily suggest that there was any financial advantage as a result of the CCO, because there'd be some additional cost, but also it was difficult except for an extrapolation out 8, 9, 10 years away as to whether or not it would actually generate more business in its own right because it's separate. So it's a very subjective question, but we're very open to it.
And those issues will be discussed when the paper comes back in the paper, will it?
Yeah, later this year, I suspect, and Richard Briggs and myself have been discussing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Sean. Is there any other discussion? Oh, bugger, I'm doing what Dave does. James.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, you say in your report here about you recommending that the Claudelands Event Centre be sold in the last triennium.
Yes.
I wouldn't be against that sort of idea if we had a forward-thinking purchaser, but
if we had a what?
A forward-thinking purchaser, someone who could take it into the future. But for the new council members, when you put that proposal up, what was it defeated by? Can you remember?
What was the what?
What was it defeat by? Like you'd put it up for sale. What was it defeated by?
Probably another one of those 12 ones. 12 versus 1. I can't remember, to be honest. I would have. No, I must have had a seconder because it got seconded. I don't know if my seconder skedaddled.
I felt sorry for you.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if my seconder skedaddled when it came to actually voting or not. So no, it was the casting vote was not required.
Okay. Thanks, mate.
Jeff. Oh, shit. Sorry, Jeff.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, look, just in regard to the same point that you raise about putting up this recommendation to sell it, I guess I'm just asking for some clarification. I recall seeing a report or reference to a report from consultants in Auckland in regard to that a few months back when we were talking about H3. And my understanding or my recollection is that they, in regards to selling Clauden's Event Centre, they said that there would be no buyers. That was their... I guess I'm asking for some clarification from staff here, what the consultants actually recommended on a possible sale of Clauden's Event Centre.
Yes, if I could respond to that through the Chair. The consultants at that time, and also referring back to Councillor Cassin's earlier comment in the last triennium when the issue or question of selling Clauden was raised, the same advice on both instances was that there are no sensible buyers out there for a convention entertainment complex of the nature of Clauden's. There's only one in the country that is privately owned, and that's Sky City. And that's because they can generate profits through activity outside the convention centre and activity. All other convention centres, entertainment arenas and everything around New Zealand and indeed Australia are owned by, have either been funded by central government or by local government. And we're all aware of some new convention centres that are being commencing build now in New Zealand, and they're all being funded by central government and local government. So no sensible private sector buyers.
Okay, so, sorry, second question, if I could, just on that. So, Sean, are you convinced that we've checked that out as thoroughly as we can? That you know that there is no further investigation we could do into that? No need for a peer review of what that consultant said, or?
Look, that's my opinion is that there's nothing new to be learnt from going to different consultants. It's the matter is what it is. Having said that, there's still always the opportunity to consider whether or not a CCO model is relevant, or whether or not there can be an operating partnership with a private sector entity could be considered. Council would still own the asset, for example, pay for the asset, upkeep, everything else, but can the operation day-to-day be put out to a private sector operator? And there are one or two examples of that that exist at the moment. So the Spark Arena in Auckland is a good example of that. It is fully funded by Auckland Council. They built it, they maintain it, they pay all of its ongoing operating costs, cover depreciation, everything else, but they contract the day-to-day operation out to a third party, but they do not have to cover the costs of renewals and a whole of the things that we would have to do ongoing in any case.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Just a comment on consultants. There were a whole lot of consultants that were gathered around Clauden's when it was being developed too, and they didn't get it quite right on where they thought the results were going to come in terms of operating performance and things like that. Anyway, Mark. Oh, Paula, beg your pardon.
Thank you. Actually, Jeff did ask one of my questions, which was how many other similar assets are in private ownership, and you said Sky City, Sean, didn't you? So out of the ones that aren't, which is the majority by far, presumably in centres like Wellington and Auckland, Bay of Plenty, etc., how many of those are making financial profit? Do we know?
To my knowledge, and I do try to check this and benchmark this regularly, none of them are.
None of them
They
are
are faced with the same type of cost that we are faced with. Some of them, some of the councils, however, do handle the treatment of their accounts differently to how we do, for example. So, for example, some of the venues in Christchurch, they don't have things like finance charges or council recharges imposed on the figures. So, you know, everyone has slightly different accounting treatment.
And I think this may be a loaded question, but it's fair to say that most of them are in that game because of the social and community benefits that are hard to quantify, but...
Yes, that is correct, and a really good example of that is the huge discussion that's been going on in Christchurch recently with the proposed build of the new convention centre in Christchurch, and it's all about social and economic gain, and as I said, that's being funded and promoted very heavily by both the local council and central government as a part of the re-energisation of Christchurch.
Thank you. Just two more short questions. Gary, in respect to the paragraph that's on page 7, halfway down, things haven't improved, and indeed it's likely that things will worsen as CEC becomes older, as it faces increases from facilities competition. What evidence do you have for that? It's an interesting comment. I understood from Sean's presentation recently to us that in fact Claudelands was picking up in its performance, picking up new events and competing quite well for large-scale events. So I was just wondering where you got that comment from.
That's the bit that the CEC will become older is simply reality, and like all assets, it will eventually need to be upgraded and refurbished as per the Founders Theatre, as per their swimming pools.
I get that bit. And
okay, so well, you asked me the questions. I'm giving you the answers now. So, and I'm doing it in the same way you did. I'm giving in terms of there are two questions here. One's about getting older, and the other one's about increased competition.
Yeah, thank you.
So the older thing is just reality. That it will get older, it will become obsolete, and it will need to be refurbished somewhere along the line. The second thing is there are competition from increased competition for facilities all around the country. I mean, there's the Auckland one, there's the Wellington one, Sean has just talked about them. There's the Christchurch one, there's one going to Queenstown, I understand. So there is a plethora of similar facilities being planned and developed and built and opened around the country.
Thank you. I understand the number of facilities. I still am interested in whether that's leading to actual real competition for the use of the facility, or whether we're still in that growth. Do you follow where I'm coming from? We're still in that growth phase where we're picking up more events and activities within the arena.
Yes, perhaps, Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to that. Yes, we do still have a growth in activity, not necessarily growth in revenue. But the fact that new venues are coming online absolutely will mean competition going forward. However, we are in a niche, so we're not necessarily going to compete head-on with the likes of the International Convention Centre that's being built in Auckland, because their market is going to be very, very different to the market that we normally get. In fact, if anything, we might get some spillover out of that venue. So it's a tough one to call whether it's all good or all bad, but this is, irrespective of new builds, this is always going to be a competitive business to be in.
Thank you. One last question. I'm interested in the report, the report or the further conversations around CCO. I'm presuming that will include a range of options from an asset-owning CCO and other models, and given that we're sort of entering into very early discussions around what the governance of the future regional theatre might also look like, I'd imagine that there'll be a range of options brought to us around how a CCO might operate, who would manage, what the governance structure would look like, etc.
For H3?
Yep, for this.
So this is similar to the discussion Jeff was talking about, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm asking, would an asset owning model be part of that, as well as a non-asset owning CCO, or
I would assume so, but
services?
Sean's up on his feet.
Yeah, and look, yes, those options would be considered in terms of where that's going. If I may, Mr. Chair, just remind you that, as you're aware, we have been working with the H3 group within Council in terms of continuing to separate it out a little bit, so it's a standalone business unit within Council, so the ease with which we could convert to a CCO model or some other type of model is getting easier as we sort of progress, being more standalone and a bit more independent in terms of how we operate day to day.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark.
Thanks, Chair. Just getting back to that report we had, it was a few months ago, wasn't it, with regards to the options for Claudelands down the track. Wasn't one of the objections they had to actually selling it being that, A, there'd be no buyers, but the other one was that we'd only end up being the lessees of it ourselves, and it wouldn't save us a heck of a lot of money anyway?
Look, I can't recall that option about being lessees. Sorry, I have to refer to the paper. I just can't recall that option. I mean, at the end of the day, if you were to find a buyer to buy it, the question is, how do you protect Council's interests in terms of what you want the outcome of the operation to be, and how do you protect Council's massive investment that it's already made, so that it doesn't get lost or evaporated or to be blunt, written down in a stroke of a pen.
So can I just ask Gary where you want to go with this? If you had your Nirvana, would you buy it and bowl it, or would you get it sold and bowl it? Is that what you'd prefer? Or
bowl it, did you say?
As in get rid of the whole thing entirely, or would you prefer it was there? Or
no, it's there and it's it has value.
Right.
I don't think we are the people who are best positioned to get value out of it.
Okay.
And I think at the moment you're looking at something that every year, regularly, reliably, gives our ratepayers a loss of about $7 to $8 million.
Yep.
I think there are much better ways for the thing to be dealt with. I mean, you know, if someone from Japan comes and buys it, they're not going to bring in a whole lot of helicopters and take the thing to Tokyo. It's always going to be there. It's just a matter of what is the best structure for it to be operated.
Right, so would the dialogue be more useful then looking at that rather than the option of selling it? Because it would seem that there aren't a great many buyers in Tokyo with huge helicopters or who are going to come and buy it. So would it be more useful if we...
Well, it's never been put to the test. I mean, with all due respect to Sean and the consultants we engaged, the only way you'll ever find out is if you actually put it on the market and it becomes available. Then you'll find out if there's any... And someone might take it off us for $1, and that would at least reduce our operating losses, which is a couple of $1 million a year, and would put us in a situation where there's a whole lot of overheads we'd have to look at, and some of those overheads we would be able to extinguish.
Well, can I put my stake in the
benefit of the
ground and
ratepayer?
suggest that, yep, it loses money, as every stadium and convention centre does, but selling it because it doesn't make money is kind of like selling the windscreen wipers because they don't make the car go faster, whereas they serve a function in the car. So I think this serves a function in the city. I would suggest we move the discussion around how we operate it and try and get it minimising those losses ourselves. It would seem that the talk of selling it is it's headline grabbing but not necessarily useful, as we've had reports in the past that people tend to avoid us now because they think the ownership structure, remember that conversation, Sean, isn't useful. So can I perhaps suggest we talk more about, and promptly if we're serious about it, but heading down to CCO and seeing what we can do to get the thing.
Well, that's coming back to us anyway for that discussion. Right. I don't resolve from anything I've written in here, and I think, as I say, I think it's an atrocious loss that we, as I said, and you're sort of confirming what I've said, we've become comfortably numb about our ratepayers being whacked $7 to $8 million every year for the Clauden's Event Centre. We're just accepting it, we're letting it go, and we've given up trying. And now I'm not, and with no disrespect to what our staff are doing, but you know, there's only so much they can do operating within a local authority structure.
Yeah.
So that was my point for bringing it up, really.
Okay, all right, I'll debate it. So, okay. It is. Thank you.
Martin.
Yes, yeah, obviously a balance, because obviously we want to continue to market the centre as much as possible, but that is a separate issue from the long-term management and ownership issue, and I don't think we should be afraid at all to hear from you, very clear viewpoint. And obviously we later this afternoon are going to have a workshop around our rating and our funding mechanisms for local government, as I understand it, and we're going to be making some terrible crunch decisions over the next 10-year plan, of which we only have oversight over the next 2 years, 3 years, and then the new council has control. But in terms of, I think, what Councillor McPherson was raising, there are a number of ways that I think we should keep an open mind on this. I don't quite agree with your outright sale, but I do think we have to keep an open mind about other forms of partnerships, and we're going to probably see that in where we may have made a contribution, but the theatre is an example where some totally different outfit runs it. We've already seen that with the Meteor, the Clarence Street projects. Who knows what's happening at Founders, but I think we just have to think laterally and be very open-minded as to how we can oversee a major public asset which, however, as you correctly say, is a significant impost cost-wise, on ratepayers. I think it has huge, there's much social good, much good that comes out of the centre, but if we can look at a mechanism by which our exposure to the year-to-year running costs are reduced, then obviously we should have an open mind, and I think, with respect, Mr Chair, we should have an open mind for all things to continue to be on the table.
Thank you, Martin. Is there any more discussion or debate or questions on the Chair's report?
Through the Chair, if I can just add one comment on this discussion is, whilst there is a loss for Claudelands that we're budgeting, let's not forget there's a huge investment in an asset that we're still depreciating. So if we were to take a different view on Claudelands, obviously to sell it for $1, you would write off a significant amount of money that's left to be depreciated over the term of the asset. So if we ever sold it, we would have to sell it for its net book value to break even on that perspective.
Just on that point, I'd suggest that write-off occurred the day that a council 5-6 years ago made the decision to do it. That's when the write-off occurred. They put $68 million into an asset that was not worth $68 million. It cost $68 million, but it has never ever generated $1 of profit. So to say that was worth $68 million. So that write-off should have been taken on the day it was opened. Our balance sheet should have been written down, and we should have accepted that we'd made a significant decision there. All right, I'll move the report be received. Can I have a seconder, please? Mallet, Casson, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now I've got just in terms of running the meeting today, we had a briefing the other day, which we didn't quite finish some stuff. The items that were left to be discussed were the rates, some discussions about rates, and some discussions about our public engagement process for the 10-year plan. Just want to try and organise things today. I think we can probably get the meeting done by 12:30 at the latest, I would hope, today, with a bit of help from you guys. So the suggestion is perhaps, when would you like to?
45 minutes after we finish.
Okay, so if we target sort of 12:30 and then back at 1:15, is that everyone? So do people, like I know Dave did say to me he's got something on sometime.
I have an appointment at 3:30. Hopefully, will it be wrapped up by then? Hopefully.
Hopefully.
If not,
sorry, Jeff. Okay.
By 12:30, so I booked in meetings, so I can't stay.
Through you, Mr Chair and General Manager, could we have a show of hands? Because obviously the intent of the exercise was to try and get a better turnout, and we totally respect that if things plop into a diary out of left field, that you can't be held by that. But I'm wondering if we could just get a show of hands of who actually would be available to come this afternoon. Just from 1:15 till 3, basically. Will that be a realistic window of time?
I think so, but if we were to get through earlier, then we could start.
Sure.
Straight up.
If we can get through earlier, we go straight in. Yeah, and if we get through earlier, do we have to go into committee room?
So good thing. Who can be here from 1:30? So from 1:30, we're talking about.
Or 1 o'clock.
From 1 o'clock till 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so people are Jeff and Angela and Dave had said to me. Okay, so is that satisfactory?
I don't think 6 is. I mean, I think that particular workshop, and I'm not trying to delay it, but you know, we want and this is not. We want maximum turnout.
Well, I do think it comes to the nub of where we're heading in the 10-year plan. So the guts of the rates update is around the modelling that was requested and bringing back and just advising council of the numbers, what they're looking like, or how. Not so much the end game, but exactly what different options and what.
When's the next DORID workshop?
So. Yeah, Fridays when we do, Blair's going to present the full growth options for the 10-year plan. That'll be quite significant.
Will everyone be there for Friday?
Could we break this one today down to just having the rates today, and because it's two things, rates and public engagement. Would that make it easier for some people? I don't know.
You kind of want Andrew there with the rates thing, because it's budget.
Why don't we sort this out in the break rather than the
we'll sort it out in the break
and get a meeting going.
Good idea. We'll sort out in the break. The intent is to have maximum turnout, and we'll
Okay. We'll move on to item number 8, page 13, 10-year plan monitoring report.
Thank you, Mr Chair.
Unfortunately, Tracy's ill.
Tracy is ill, not very well today, so I'll present the report. A couple of things to note in the monitoring report. It is our first monitoring report of the 17-18 year, so it has 2 months of results. The report looks at the results as at the end of August, 31st of August 2017. So we start off the year well with an operating result and surplus of 18.2 million. That's favourable against a budget of 5.9 million. Our balancing the books also has a favourable variance of 6.8 million. Key contributions to this result are higher user charges.
Sorry, David, just to be clear for everyone, that is the old balancing the books.
Well, it's the current one. It's not the PwC measure.
Yeah,
it's the current one until we finish the 10-year plan.
Yep.
And then we'll, if we decide to resolve that, we'll use a different measure. We'll start
just so people are clear,
including that. Yep.
Clear as to what they're looking at there.
So we've had higher user charges revenue, higher interest, and of course higher DCs than budgeted, and higher vested assets than budgeted. So that's what started our year off in a positive position in terms of revenue. On top of that, we've had lower spending in a couple of areas. That's maintenance and consultants. However, that'll change through the year, but it just shows a favourable result year to date. Our spend on capital for the last 2 months is exactly on what we budgeted at 9.3 million. I suppose key attention I'd like you to draw to is page 18, paragraph 51, where we have emerging issues. Now going forward in the Finance Committee and in terms of papers that we present, I think it's really important that when we are talking about asking Council to approve amounts of money, that we give a holistic view in terms of what that impact is on the future budget / 10-year plan. You'll see in paragraph 51 there are a number of items that were mentioned. A little bit out of date, so I just want to give you a bit of an update on that. As you know, the library, we approved at the council meeting on the 21st a capital spend of $705,000, also included $17,200 in operating costs. With Waterworld, we approved at that same council meeting a capital spend of $5.672 million. On the growth and infrastructure meeting on the 12th of September, we had approved $194,000 worth of capital around LED street lighting. There's also been at the council meeting on the 21st, $200,000 of additional consulting work around the water CCO. Waikato Theatre was another $250,000 in terms of design at that same council meeting. $27,000 for consultation plan on the future of founders, $150,000 at the Community and Services meeting on the 19th of September for Clarence Street Theatre, and there will also be around $600,000 or $591,000 for the Valley Terrace stormwater pipe, and that was discussed on the 21, recommended to the Growth and Infrastructure Committee. Correct. So very important that at this meeting that we just group all that together and understand that when that comes through, that's going to extend a difference between what we budgeted to spend this year and what we will actually spend. Really important for everybody to note those decisions and the impact, because when we go into 10-year planning and we look at what our balancing the books items are, there's some activities that we need to undertake in the earlier years to cover the cost of those in terms of revenue initiatives. Okay, so I think that's where I'll leave it. There were 3 errors that were put in the monitoring report, so I apologise for that. The team are quite under the pump with regard to 10-year plan, and if I can just get you to update your monitoring report in 3 places. Page 15, the very last bullet point. We've actually had a loss on interest rate swaps. Our floating market rate is better than our swaps at the moment, so we had a lot of gains last year in terms of reducing our liability. There's a couple of months here where we've had losses. They total 3.2 million, so that's not a gain, it's a loss. If I continue to page...
Is that an error, or that's just, it's changed since the report was written?
No, that's an error.
Oh, okay.
It should have said loss instead of gain. In terms of page 16, if I can take you down to paragraph 34, the sum total of July and August should equal the $9.3 million that we've spent year to date, because these numbers represent what we've spent on capital. So those numbers in July and August should read 3.4 and 5.9 million. And the last item to correct is if we go to page 27 in note 6. There's a comment at the bottom of that table. Unfortunately, that was a last year comment. It should read that the swaps have increased, the liability is increased by 3.2 million, not reduced by 13.9. Got that? So those are the main topics for the monitoring report. Happy to take questions.
Paula.
Thank you. Gosh, where are they now? So just out of interest, the lower
Paula, can everyone just give us a page number and paragraph, please?
Oh, yeah, I will.
Thank you.
So on page 15, expenditure variances, just first question was lower expenditure on maintenance and services cost. How and when do we know what drove the lower maintenance and service? Where's the...
So there'll be a gap between what we budgeted to spend and what our actual maintenance plans have allowed us to do. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
so
they're never 100%.
No, they won't be. But I think governors have to keep an eye on how maintenance does track against what is proposed, because that's what the asset management plans are all about.
Yep.
So when and how do we keep track of what doesn't happen?
Well, each general manager is responsible for assets under their portfolio, and they're managing those on a monthly basis. So when they go through their financial reports, if you like, they will track and they'll see where they're running, and they'll have their explanations with facilities or external consultants to make sure that they've planned to get on top of those.
Okay, that's...
So is the origin of your question around concern about not letting...
It's just I guess we have to be mindful that if we slip in this area, it can have consequences in the middle to long term.
Yep.
You know, it can also
Do you have any examples, Paula?
Yeah, probably. It can also be a death by 1,000 cuts if you don't keep an eye on it. So I'm not going to go in there or cast stones or anything at the moment.
Sure.
I'm just interested in where the clarity is when that budget like this comes through, how we can go, well, I know exactly what wasn't done and why it wasn't done. Now, I do know it comes through the individual reports.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what page am I looking at for that?
It's another report.
Because I did look at this stuff. It's just really hard to see where it comes from.
As a high-level comment.
Yeah, I see that, but even still, it's really hard to kind of, in one place. But anyway, okay. Next question was with the higher development contributions coming in, when would they come in? They go out, and under the new regime, they'll come in. They'll be treated differently than what they presently are in this way. So they come in. They're only there for a short while, and before they're expended on what they're supposed to be done, right? So when would you see that happen?
So if I can just test what you said, in terms of development contributions, they will always come in and be recognised from an accounting perspective as income.
Yep.
When our current balance in the books measure includes them as income.
Yep.
If we move to the PwC-based measure, or the new measure, then 65% of those DCs won't be included in that measure.
Yes, I get that.
100% will still be in the accounting profit and loss account, if you like. DCs, the function of DCs is that they're paying for upfront development that we've done. So 85% of development that we do is spent before we even can crack open a growth cell or a section. So when those development contributions come through, they're just attributed to the cost of opening that cell.
Yeah. That's right, I suppose. Yeah, so even though they can look favourable, they're really spent.
And that's why we're looking at changing that measure so that we can stay true to that financial principle of everyday revenue paying for everyday costs.
Okay, so just a couple of other short questions. The aquatic facilities, I'm aware of all those rafts of decisions that you said that
Yep.
we've made.
Yep.
The aquatic facilities, part of that was a bringing forward a budget in, can't remember what year, a couple of years' time, bringing
Sorry,
it
what
forward.
page are you on, Paula?
18. So there's 5.672 million.
Okay.
Part of that was in budgets in year
That's correct.
2021, or can't quite remember. So that although that makes a difference this year, that won't
Yep.
have to be expended that year because
That's
or,
correct.
or collected for in that year.
That's correct.
Yeah, so we must keep them,
Be mindful of that.
be
in
mindful
terms
of the long-term
Yep.
implications of that before we wring our hands over bringing money forward.
That's correct. The only comment to make that is if every year we demanded that we wanted to break even in terms of balancing our books, rather than acknowledge that we'd be spending some money early and therefore not spending it in a later year.
That's right.
That's when that would come into
That's right. And
discussion.
then that's fundamental, therefore, going back to that first question I asked, that we really understand how the asset management plans are in fact being implemented against their timeline and budget.
Yep.
Because if we don't, we could lose track of exactly that
Yep.
sort of thing. This is a proactive bringing forward a budget
Yep.
for good reason.
Yes, it is.
Right, and so we could expect that to be noted in the year it would have been spent.
Yep.
So, yeah. The other thing is, just wanted to ask, can't remember what year it was in that we, financial year it was in, that we made the free parking, free 2-hour parking? Because we have added a lot of things in this year, but was that in last financial year?
Last financial year is when we moved from 2 hours to 6 hours, 4 hours, sorry.
Yes, that was the $2 million.
It's built into this plan.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, 1.4. I was over the trial. Yeah, I know. I'm just asking where it sits. It's all about understanding where it comes into the on the line. That's all. Thank you.
No problem.
Angela.
Yeah, look, just following on from Councillor Southgate's question/comment around bringing budgets forward. It is an interesting concept though, isn't it? Because when we don't actually have the money this year, we bring a paper figure forward
We would be just
that we
using,
haven't rated for,
it would be using debt.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept that's always interested me, I guess. Okay, so page 17, down the bottom, David, 50 with the risks and opportunities. The aquatics decision, the $100,000, and I think I was the only one that voted against this business case, but that was made in the last, now this is where we go wrong, and Gary's absolutely right with putting dates on, because we don't put enough dates in things. That resolution simply tagged that $100,000 decision into risks and opportunities. But I would have assumed that we make a decision in March, we're making the risks and opportunities for that financial year. So why is it showing up now?
So the decision was made, you're correct, on the 9th of March 17, but the actual impact of that, the spend was going to be in this financial year.
So we didn't make, that's not indicated in any resolution. So why has it ended up here?
It would be depending on the timing that we could get this work done, whether we meet the end of the year or it starts in this financial year.
So I guess I'm flagging a real concern that I have, and it's not just this particular decision, is that we need to, the second we put up anything that says either in risks and opportunities or it might be a pipeline project, we actually need to identify that financial year, because the motion doesn't do it.
Yep.
And I would have assumed, as I said, March, you've still got April, May, June in that financial year, but we've not. We've sort of deferred it really, and there's a lot of resolutions on our books like that. So I think we need to tighten up that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether this is the case, but we may have intended on doing it before the end of the financial year, but
Yeah.
then things happened
Yeah.
after the report, after the decision, and so they moved through. But I
Yeah.
take your point.
Yeah, and I guess the other one, of course, is the major one down there of 1.8 million Eastern Bulk main repairs. So it's tidying up and being a lot more transparent.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I like to follow the money, and it's hard to follow the money when I'm assuming it's in one financial year and it pops up in another.
Sure. There was some money spent on the Eastern Bulk Main
Yeah.
in the prior financial year,
Yeah.
but it was always going to be a staged process.
Yeah. And the other one down there, I don't know quite why it's in a paler colour, the HIF fund, and I apologise because I should
What
know
page are
this.
you on,
That's-
Angela?
Same
17.
place, Gary. 525,000, and this is under the CE's delegated authority. I looked back at the resolution from July's decision, which when we accepted the non-binding agreement, and we went to move to the next business case, and I had a look at the agenda, and there was nothing in there indicating that it would be extra cost, and in fact it actually said in the budget finance line that it would be met with current budgets. And I remember, didn't have time to look back on YouTube, but I do remember several elected members questioning that, and that was the case. So what's gone wrong there?
I can't actually answer that. I don't know. I don't know the origin of that, but I can find out and come back to you guys on an email.
Yeah, I mean, $500,000. That's an impact. So if you can come back on that, I'd appreciate that. So I'm quite concerned about that. Page 23. A couple of questions on there. Under revenue at the top, number 2, revenue from number 3, subsidies and grants there. It says not a material variance, but it's 120,000, and we report anything over 100,000 on our documents. Sorry, I've just answered my own question. Never mind, don't worry, I know what it is.
Should we ignore that one?
Yeah, ignore that one.
We'll ignore that one.
And Paul has asked my next question down there. I was just wondering if this would be a helpful thing to report on. It would help me. On number 7 there, we've got vested assets. We've got 2.15 million there. We would keep a register of vested assets as
Absolutely.
they come onto the books.
Absolutely.
I would be really interested to see that in the financial reporting. It would give us a clearer understanding of how things move, because of course as soon as they come onto our books we start depreciating them,
Yeah.
and that pushes our costs out. So
It
it
does.
would be interesting to see some kind of register or an abbreviated schedule of vested assets as and when they come up through
Of
the
what they
quarterly
actually are, you
report,
mean?
and what they are. So
There'd be
Parks or pipes and things like that.
yeah.
It'd be a significant list. So when we receive a vested asset from a developer,
Yeah.
it's kind of not just handed over as a road or a park. It's in very much detail, because each item has a different life, and that's how we run our maintenance programs. So. But we could have a go at putting together some sort of schedule that gives you some sort of
we
bit more
wouldn't need to
transparency
delve
around
into
the number.
we wouldn't need to delve into the detail,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and obviously I understand that assets have a different life, and that's
Yeah.
how we work out our depreciation and our development contributions, charges, and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there's something that would be abbreviated when it's the significant assets that come onto the books. Is
Oh, yeah.
kind of what I would like to see.
Well, you're right. I mean, if we have a look at our increased depreciation over the last 18 months, in fact longer than that, there's a significant amount of vested assets that have been given us as a consequence of growth. That has an impact on council in terms of the depreciation number.
That's huge impact on the books, yeah.
It is.
So, if you could work on something, that would
Sure.
be really helpful. That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Angela, just on that thing, I think when you talked about the assets are quite detailed, you're saying a road is not actually a road, it's broken down into the levels of seal and all that sort of stuff. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay.
We need the road.
Yeah.
Not
But yeah.
So probably what I'll do is I'll take a look at what we can get and maybe touch base with you and just see if...
With Gary and myself, it'll be
Yep.
great, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dave?
Right. I'm not sure whether it's part of this report or going to be in the future, but I'm wondering when we, in our projections, at least for this current financial year, we're including anything to do with the income from the pensioner housing sale that's due in this financial year?
No, next financial year.
What date?
Do you mean the repayment of the loan?
Yeah, the second, second tranche,
yeah.
the balance.
So that will impact cash because it'll be paying an advance. So cash. So in other words, our debt will be reduced by that amount of money. In terms
what
of
stage is that due again?
I believe it's in 18-19 and around March.
I'm sure there was a 2018 figure in there, which is why I'm asking whether it's in this year or not.
Yeah, and that's why. And there is an 18 figure. I think it's in the 18-19 year, which is next year rather than 17-18. But it will only impact cash, as in we'll get a receipt. It won't be
lower interest charges as well.
It certainly will.
Yeah.
If everything else remaining the same and we got that cash payment, it would reduce our debt.
So when Angela asked the report about accessible housing, it would be handy to have some information on that side of things, exactly when it's expected,
sure.
what the existing plans for its use are, because that's certainly going to affect the LTP.
Yep. So I can tell you that it's currently just been planned to reduce debt. It's not.
But there's been no discussion about that, has there?
No, and that's kind of when we get into the 10-year plan detail. We'll decide whether you want to spend it for something specifically or whether that's just to contribute to what other growth initiatives or other initiatives you want to do.
So I guess my concern is that we're about to enter those discussions and everyone's a little hazy on what's happening in that
We'll
sphere.
update. I'll send you an email around to everybody just to remind you exactly when that's forecast to be sent to be paid.
Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a couple, David.
Yep.
And I appreciate that you're not Tracy.
I don't know how to take that.
Which is a big shame. If you go to page 21, and it's just one of those things that's so blimmin' big that you have to ask the question, how come rates are up at $37.8 million, whereas this time last year they were $24 million? That's a huge increase, and it pretty much accounts for all of our big surplus.
Yeah, I do know that this month includes the quarterly rates charge, but in terms of the reconciliation to last year,
but surely we don't account for our rates on a cash basis, do we? I mean, we would amortise it over 12 months, I assume.
Well, no, once we invoice the ratepayer, then it comes through in terms of revenue. So it happens in four lumps. That's right. So I can't. What I'm saying is I don't know why $12 million difference is an interesting question. I'll
it's a bloody big. Yeah, it's just such a huge difference that it's otherwise been accounted differently, or it's
Yep.
We've got some, and the development contributions. And I know this has been raised already. We've got just about $5 million already after 2 months. If you annualise that, that would be 5 times 6, be 30 million. Clearly, we're way ahead of where we're expecting.
Yeah.
Is there any particular? I know that's a hard one.
So lumpy.
Yeah. Okay.
It's so lumpy. Last year we didn't have as strong a year as the year before, if you remember, and so sometimes we can have a good month and sometimes not so good.
Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to signal is the accounting result, the normal formal accounting result.
Yes.
To me looks, and I'm not. This is not a criticism of anyone, but it seems to be way optimistic, or not optimistic. It's way better than it possibly would be.
Yep.
Okay, just
well, it's just a moment in time. It's just
and I mean from when I was in the 7th form at Boys High learning bookkeeping, we kind of smoothed our revenue for those sort of things, and it just gives an unrealistic presentation of our position.
Well, I guess the in terms of accounting rules, we recognise it now. Accounting rules change over time, and we recognise it when we've invoiced our customers, our ratepayers. Sorry. So, but then the value's in the explanation, I suppose.
Just for the record, I failed accounting that year.
I'm surprised.
Okay, are there any more comments or questions or regarding the tenure and monitoring report? Okay, I'll move the report. Mallet, Taylor, any debate? Okay. Those in favour, those against, carried, unanimous. Thank you. We're now on to item number 9, Key Projects Monitoring Report, page 61.
Through the Chair, I'll present that as well. Attached to the monitoring report is a schedule showing that there are no changes in terms of risks for these projects. Happy to take questions.
Mark.
Just one quick one, and I'm not actually sure if it's the right forum to ask. But regards the page 63, the Hamilton Ring Road upgrade and extension, there's a premise there the ATC are using that old building there, and as time drags on, they're still trying to find a new place. Have we got an update on where they're at with that? Anybody or Chris? They were in here the other day, apparently. The ATC, the big old building there that's on where the ring road's going to go. It seems to, as we take our time, it keeps getting stay after stay of execution, which is fine.
Oh, no, I don't. So I'll find out.
Yeah, if you would, that'd be great. Thank you, Hal. That's it for me.
Thanks, Mark. David.
Yeah, the Hamilton Ring Road upgrade and extension, which is the second item on page 63 there. Through you to Chris, can we get an idea of the time delays that this land procurement delay may cause us? I'm a bit concerned that we should be starting this construction season with work and we haven't spent a cent yet, according to the figures here, as of the end of August, which means that we haven't done any work design on it, although somewhere else it's saying there's some approvals given, but construction season goes pretty quick. So what's the reality of the timeline there now?
I can assure you that we're working diligently on getting the project to the start line. I do pick up your point about spending no dollars on that. I need to check that. But we're working on all fronts to get the project to the start line, including a lot of design work. We've started a process on the land required just for the Cobbenwairy interchange. We will be in a position, I think, we're hoping to be in a position to tender the works by this Christmas time or soon after. It'll be dependent on the land, but probably more dependent on funding approval by council, so we don't have approved budget to do it. So we'd have to come back to council to ask council if they wanted us to start the project. But we are working on all fronts and very hard to progress that and get to the start line, and it's going really well. So we have started the land discussions.
Well, given that council approved the concept design many months ago, when's it going to come to us for approval of the expenditure, even if there's a range of expenditures? And we obviously, until you do the final design and get that signed off, you can't work out the exact costs, but I'd hate us to sort of hit the start of December and not having had put in front of us an amount for approval.
Yep. Can I, through you, Mr Chair, just check our ability to get it to the next Growth and Infrastructure Committee meeting? I think we're that close. Okay. If it's not this one, will certainly be the next one. We're very close to being able to do that.
All right, we'll put it on the agenda then of the next one, and then Democracy staff will hassle your staff about getting the report done.
Yeah,
the chairman of that committee.
I'm looking at Chris Barton, he's not firing daggers at me, so I think we'll be able to do that. If not this one, at least the next one.
No, we'll go aim for this one, thanks.
Nothing like a bit of pressure, Councillor.
Thank you. Martin. Oh, sorry.
That's right.
Martin.
Yeah, if you could also, probably through Community Committee, whether it's probably a GM report, on that ring road, once the plans are in a reasonable stage of finalisation, then we need obviously an update as to the use, the land titles, and what will rejoin the East Town belt. And picking up Councillor Bunting's point, obviously just an update of what's happening to the tenants, people in that area, including the equestrian, the HCC, etc. And also we want to be right across that the pedestrian link, obviously cycleway pedestrian link across the proposed overbridge into the Hamilton Gardens. So there's a whole range of jigsaw pieces to make sure that we have ensured that we have all the jigsaws in place. And I'm going to give you the example of the very, very good underpass going from Grey Street through to the Hamilton Gardens. However, as Chris and others know, and you know, there wasn't quite a joined up thinking in terms of where the path would go on the Hamilton Gardens side. Now, I think that's been sorted and that's good, but I think it's really important that we have the big micro picture, because obviously with this route to be completed, then there's a whole lot of other opportunities and tidy up that happens at the same time. Now, whether that comes through probably whether it's a one-stop shop through G&I committee, or whether the green space community aspects come through Paula's committee, I don't know. But it is important that we join all those dots.
Thanks, Martin. I've just got a question also on the same topic, but it's on a different page, 62, paragraph 8, and it's about the land procurement, Chris. And we're talking about iwi first rights, etc., and we're developing a process through the Tainui Hamilton City Council Governance Forum.
Yep, so I just referred to that in, when I was answering.
Oh, were you talking about that then?
Yeah, so that process is underway and we'll include that in the report back.
I didn't hear the word Tainui come up in that discussion.
Well, the issue was about land.
Oh, okay.
Purchase, yeah.
Okay, so that's the issue you're talking about. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, we have no further questions. I'll move the report be received. Mallet, Bunting, any debate? Okay, those for, those against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 10, Rotokauri bulk water supply on page 65 of your agendas.
Good morning, I'm Chris Barton from the City Infrastructure Group. I'm responsible for the project delivery. So we've got a report here. We've currently got a project to install a major water supply pipe to the Rotokauri area. It's currently funded at this financial year. We're currently out in a public tender process to award that physical works contract. As part of this report, we are requesting delegation to the Chief Executive to award the contract following our tender submission and evaluation process. And the purpose of that is to expedite the contract award process and get underway with construction. The process of coming back to committee subsequent to the tender evaluation introduces some slight delay to the contract award process, and making the most of the summer construction season is important to delivery of the project. So that's the purpose of the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, given that the contract hasn't been let yet, is it still contemplated that the whole thing would be finished in the current financial year?
Yep, our current contract timeframes do enable us to finish works, obviously subject to contractors programming, but our current estimates are completion this financial year, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any further questions? We'll open up the debate. Any debate? I'll move, I'll second. That's McPherson, Mallet. Those in favour, those against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Members of the media will be thrilled that they can go home now. We are now about to move into the public excluded part of the agenda.
Make sure that if we go into, when we go into that workshop, if we go into the workshop today, that
The rates workshop you're talking about?
Yeah, that was open workshop, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, just to, I understand, I wasn't here, my apologies, that there's not going to be a full attendance due to the fact we didn't notify the elected members of the change. We're going to take that briefing to the 3rd of October.
Fine.
And that way there's, and in response to your question, yes, it is open.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to be clear, so we're not.
When you finish today, we're finished.
We're finished. That's
so
good.
when this committee's finished.
Yes, that's correct.
Gee, that's brightened my whole
If
day.
that's
up.
okay with
Thank you.
councillors.
Yes, wonderful. Good chairing.
That's why I put in the chair. That's why I put quite a few councillors in that chair to reduce the It doesn't work in some of us. You.
Chair, sorry.
Okay, I'll move. Pardon? Where you go?
Now, I have a question on C3, the development contributions update going into public excluded. I need to be a lot more comfortable with the reasons why. I've read the confidential report.
Someone will have me.
I understand the risks, but it is a policy discussion, and I are very concerned about why we need to have that in confidential.
I prefer to have the conversation confidential and come back out again if you aren't satisfied.
There is one thing, if I could...
Can I just help you with the formal rationale? Is to enable council to carry out commercial...
Read it, Gary.
Yeah, to enable the council to carry out commercial Section 7 2H activities without disadvantage.
Yeah, and I'm saying I'm questioning that. I'd like to hear what Dave has to say.
Chair?
I've got no one on the list.
No, I was there.
Oh,
As soon
okay,
as I said
sorry.
Mr.
Where you
Chair,
go? Sorry, Angela, you done?
I'd like to hear what
I'm...
Dave wants to say.
Jesus Christ, Gary.
I don't know you're a man of religion, Dave. But anyway, I'm looking at my list here. Now, numbers have obviously jumped around. So Angela was speaking last time I heard. I just checked to see that she was okay and you're
It was in
ready to go.
response to her issue.
Way you go.
Thank you. Any process that's set up to do with development contributions has to be public at some stage anyway. So the discussion of the process doesn't have to be, and the deliberations by us don't necessarily have to be, but there has to be a public process involved in that. And so I think the rights of the public in the DC discussion area are protected. We can't do the whole thing from thinking up something to changing it and locking that in without having the public involved somewhere.
Yep, Richard.
So you're further to Councillor Dave's comments, there are a number of legal matters as well relating to DC that I'd like to, for those reasons, have this conversation in confidential. And I can alliterate on those in confidential as well without prejudicing that conversation, if you wish as well.
Thank you. So we're in debate now as to whether we'll go into confidential.
Have you moved the motion?
No, well, did I move it?
Yeah, we need a seconder.
Okay, it hasn't been seconded yet.
I'll
So if
second.
we're going to have a seconder, okay, now we're in debate about whether we should go into confidential. Is there any debate? Angela had a question, or did you? Okay, it's
Make
back
a
up there.
comment.
Yep,
Look, I think when we start talking about policy and public excluded, that a policy is available on the website now, and look, it's really hard because I've read this, so it's hard for me to debate. The information is discoverable now because the policy is public, and I think we are stretching the line of transparency and openness very, very thin, and I will be voting against this.
David?
Yeah, thanks. as most people know, I've been fiercely in favour of having things done in public where they possibly could be, and I could have wished for some more support myself in the last few years on that, including in recent times, but I think we're getting a lot better. So that's just the first comment. The second comment is that what we're discussing is a process later, not a policy. Policy, well, we may well touch on the policy, but the policy discussion has to go out for a public process. That's part of the deal. So I'm quite relaxed that we can discuss the process in confidence, given the potential issues and concerns, some of which Richard has touched on. I'm quite confident that that's the right place to do that on this occasion, not on every occasion, on this specific occasion, and that the public will not have their rights to be involved in the policy discussion at a later stage. They will not have them removed. So I think everyone's protected by the way we're doing this at the moment, and I think it would be crazy if we caused ourselves problems, shall we say, by doing the process discussion in public.
Thanks, Dave. Martin.
I mean, no.
Sorry, that's not the order it was on here.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm just looking at what my list in here, and Martin was ahead of you. Apologise if somehow that got jumped around, but you're next,
Look,
Paula.
No, I'm fine. I'll wait for.
You're giving up?
I may not add. I'm in fact.
Okay. Paula, thank you, Martin.
you can go. It's not relevant as long as both of us do get to actually say something.
I just want to I didn't have anything to say here, by the way.
I just want to ask a question, really, in terms of Mayor Councillor O'Leary. Are you going to vote against the report or vote against going into public excluded?
And into public excluded.
Okay, and so I just need to...
Yeah, just to be clear, at the moment we are debating the decision whether or not to go into public excluded. We're not debating the matter.
I'm just making sure I'm clear on that. Thank you. I am now. Just wanted to ask in that respect, what is actually in the pink papers doesn't appear to carrying out any commercial risk. However, is what you're saying, Richard, that in going further with some of the points, such as paragraph 8, which I'm not going to read at this point in time, but paragraph 8, in talking to us about that, you're concerned that there could be some commercial or legal risk to us making a decision around the process?
There's significant commercial and legal risk attached to this, more commercial than legal, but yes.
To the process, to us agreeing to the process for a review, or the content of any potential review?
More about the fact this is a lining up memo to line us up to commence as part of the process we're currently underway for a development contribution policy review, which we do as part of the 10-year plan, and it includes our formulation work, which is important for us to keep confidential at this stage.
Okay. So
like I said, it's a lot easier to talk about this in confidential than it is in the open.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm being very careful with my words.
I just thought the paper was around the process, not around the content. That was also I was a little bit confused.
The process is part of that formulation.
Okay. I do have some sympathy for Councillor O'Leary in this regard, because I believe we've had council discussions on sensitive matters in the open consistently this year. Some things that I think would have been better, at least canvassed with council on a confidential basis and then reported to council. So that doesn't seem to be entirely consistent. But given that the CEO's comments to my questions, I'm just going to let it rest this time.
Thank you, Martin.
Yes. When Councillor McPherson supports the Chief Executive's advice, and the Chief Executive's advice is saying that there is potential significant financial, legal risk to this council if we hear the City Solicitor's opinion in open, then I think that the balance of that, and no one is more into open government than Councillor McPherson in my historic experience, then I think that's a significant thing. And I think also this council, I believe, under the new mayor, is trying to be as open and transparent as possible. Obviously, once we've received the city solicitor advice and the chief executive's advice, then we will turn our heads to how we can maximise the public accountability and participation. But make no bones that there are obviously interests, of course, that are not charities, that have the best lawyers available to them, because we are looking at significant quantums at stake here. So we have to make sure that our ducks are lined up in a row correctly. Thank you.
Is there any further debate? All right, I'll put now, just to be clear, we are deciding whether or not we're going to go into confidential. Okay, we're not discussing anything about the, okay. Do we want to go to the board for this one? Okay, can we, oh, sorry, Leo, did you want to say something? Ah. Okay, so we're deciding, we're voting to go into confidential or not. In that situation, the ducks weren't in a line? Hang on. Hang on. We haven't, can we just, have we done that or not?
No.
Okay. Can you all please vote now?
Right. Even I can master this technology now.
Okay, who says that, me or you? Can I? 8 for, 1 against, and the motion to move into confidential has won or been succeeded or something. Thank you.